Grandma, Daddy and Mommy said they're taking your money tonight, my 6-year-old granddaughter whispered at 5:30 in the morning. My heart stopped. They had no idea I'd recorded everything, the family dinner, their secret conversations, their plans to declare me mentally incompetent. 3 weeks later, I owned nothing but had everything I needed to take them down in court. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The kettle whistled softly as I reached for the mugs. The morning light hadn't yet touched the window panes, but my body didn't need the sun to know it was 5:30. After 40 years of early starts, I still woke before the birds. The house was quiet, just the way I liked it. I moved through the kitchen like muscle memory. 2 scoops of coffee, a splash of oat milk, the ceramic click of the spoon against the cup. I didn't hear Sophie's little feet. She was always light on them, more whisper than child when she walked. When I turned, she was already sitting on the edge of the kitchen stool, her legs swinging gently, still in her dinosaur pajamas. "Grandma," she said, her voice a secret, "Daddy and Mommy said they're taking your money tonight." My hand stilled mid-stir. The air in the kitchen shifted, heavier somehow. I smiled the kind of smile adults put on when they don't want a child to know they're scared. "That's a silly thing to say, sweetheart. What do you mean?" She shrugged and reached for a cracker from the jar. "I don't know. I was supposed to be asleep. They were talking downstairs. Daddy said you didn't need it all. Mommy said she'd help you." I crouched beside her and brushed a curl from her face. "You didn't dream this." "Nope. I was hiding under the blanket, but I could hear them." She went back to crunching like nothing was wrong. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the counter just long enough to steady myself. My heart was beating too hard for someone who hadn't moved more than 10 steps. Sophie finished her snack and ran off toward the living room, humming to herself. I poured the coffee, though I no longer wanted it. The bitterness rising in my throat had nothing to do with the roast. By the time Bethany walked in, heels already on, phone already in hand, I'd packed away my fear. Bethany breezed through the kitchen like it belonged to her, dropping her dry cleaning receipt on the counter without a word and opening the fridge with one hand while tapping a message with the other. I passed her the travel mug I'd already prepared. She took it without looking. "Can you pick up Sophie from school today?" she asked, finally glancing up. "Ryan has a client dinner, and I'm showing 2 properties." I nodded the same way I had for years. "Of course." She smiled briefly, tight and distracted. "You're the best," she said, and then she was gone. The front door closed with that careful click she always used when she was running late. I leaned against the sink and looked out the window. The garden still held the shape William had given it, the raised beds, the stone border. He dug every inch by hand the year after he retired, back when we believed we'd have 20 more springs. Instead, we got 2. After he passed, everything shifted. Not overnight, but in slow, quiet increments. I had 2 children, both grieving in their own way, and neither of them prepared. I sold our cabin in the mountains to pay off Ryan's credit cards when Bethany asked. She didn't like to say debt, just tight months. I let Sarah move into the apartment over the garage and never asked for rent. "It's only temporary," she said. That was 6 years ago. When Bethany wanted to start her real estate business, she needed help with a down payment on the office space. I wrote a check that day. No questions. William would have said yes, and that was enough for me. I paid for Sophie's preschool, then kindergarten, then music classes. Each time it felt right, like mothering, just longer. But somewhere along the line, they stopped saying thank you. Then they stopped asking. Now, it was assumed that I'd cover the groceries if the account ran low, that I'd keep the house just in case someone needed to move back, that I'd be here, always here, just off to the side. I rinsed the mugs in the sink, still warm from the coffee, and wiped down the counters. In the distance, I heard Sophie giggle from the living room. Closer, I heard the low murmur of voices behind a half-closed door. I didn't mean to linger in the hallway. Not exactly. I was on my way to put fresh towels in the upstairs bathroom when I caught the edge of Ryan's voice, low and clipped from behind the barely ajar guest room door. "She's not getting any younger," he said. "If we don't step in now, she might waste everything." Bethany responded, her tone softer but no less pointed. "We're not stealing from her. We're protecting her. She doesn't need that much money sitting around. It's not safe." There was a pause, the kind that carries weight, and then Ryan added, "And we could actually put it to use. That house is just sitting there like a vault." I stood perfectly still, the towel bundle pressed tight against my chest. My heart thudded once, hard and slow, like it was deciding whether to break or steel itself. "Once she signs over access, it'll make everything easier," Bethany said. "She probably won't even notice, especially if we keep it framed as support," Ryan replied. The towels slipped a little in my arms, but I didn't move. I waited until their voices softened into indistinct murmurs, then backed down the hallway, my footsteps careful, practiced. I returned to the kitchen, folded the towels neatly on a chair, and started wiping down the stovetop, though it was already clean. My hands moved out of habit, but my thoughts were elsewhere, drawing invisible lines between yesterday's whisper from Sophie and what I just heard with my own ears. They weren't planning to ask me. They were planning around me. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage either. Not yet. What I felt was something sharper, steadier, an alertness that hadn't stirred in years. The same quiet instinct that once told me when a fever was rising in a child before the thermometer confirmed it. Something was coming. That night, I called Martha. Martha didn't say hello when she picked up. She never does. Just, "What's wrong?" Like she could already hear the shift in my breathing. I told her everything. Sophie's whisper, the conversation behind the door, the way Bethany barely looked at me anymore, like I'd become another one of the fixtures in the house. Useful, dependable, but not worth consulting. When I finished, there was a short silence on her end. Then her voice came through, calm and dry as ever. "They're not protecting you, Eleanor. They're circling you." I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came because part of me had already known that. Part of me had known it even before Sophie spoke. "Check your accounts," she said. "Everything bank, investments, your will, anything you once gave them access to. Even casually take it back. I don't think they've taken anything yet, but they will. And they'll convince themselves they're doing it for your own good." I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone warm against my ear. "It's just so calculated," Martha snorted. "It's survival. They see your savings, your home, your routine, and they're thinking long term. You're a safety net, Eleanor, but safety nets don't get consulted. They get leaned on." I swallowed hard. Bethany said something about helping manage things. Just until, I don't want to anymore. She'll say it's temporary. Ryan will call it peace of mind. But once your name is off the documents, you'll never get it back. I didn't want to believe it, but I trusted Martha more than I trusted my own optimism. She'd been a family lawyer for 30 years before retiring. She'd seen this story play out before. "You need to act before they do," she said. "Get your lawyer, quietly. Don't announce a thing." I looked across the room at William's old writing desk, where I still kept the original copy of our will, the one we drafted before he passed. "Start there," she said as if she'd seen where my eyes landed. "Then look at the rest. They're counting on you being too polite to stop them." The line went quiet for a moment, just long enough for me to hear the distant ticking of the wall clock downstairs. "And Eleanor," Martha added, her voice gentler now. Remember what William used to say. If you have to choose between being nice and being safe, choose safe. I finished. It was the last piece of advice he'd given me, the month before his heart gave out. The next morning, I asked Sarah if she had a minute. She was folding laundry in the garage apartment when I came by. The space was warm and quiet, smelling faintly of detergent and lemon oil, the way she liked it. She looked up when I entered, then down again, her fingers fumbling with a towel that didn't need that much smoothing. I need to ask you something, I said. She nodded too quickly. Okay. Do you know what Ryan and Bethany are planning? She paused just long enough to answer me without words, the kind of pause where the truth stands just behind the teeth, waiting for permission. I stepped closer. Sarah. Her mouth tightened. They said you might need help, that you've been forgetting things. I haven't. I know, she whispered, eyes still fixed on the towel. But they think, or maybe they just want to believe. I waited. They're talking about a family meeting, she said finally. Soon, maybe this weekend. They want it to seem casual, but, she swallowed. They're going to ask you to sign some things. Just a power of attorney, they said, just in case. I sat down beside her on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch the neatly folded shirts. Did you agree to it? I didn't say yes, she said, but I didn't say no either. I watched her for a moment. Her hair was pulled back the same way it always had been since college neat, unassuming. She looked like a woman who had trained herself to take up less space. I knew the habit well. I don't want to lose them, she murmured. If I speak up, if I take your side, they'll freeze me out. I'm not asking you to take sides, I said gently. I'm asking you to see clearly. Sarah looked up then, finally meeting my eyes, and in that flicker of contact, I saw it. Fear, yes, but something stronger just beneath it, a line that hadn't yet been crossed. I'll be there, she said, voice small but firm. When it happens, I'll be there. I nodded, feeling something settle inside me. We sat together for a few more minutes, not saying much, just mother and daughter, folding laundry in the slant of morning light. That night, Sophie came to me again. This time, her voice was even quieter. She crawled into bed with me just after 9, clutching her favorite blanket and looking unusually serious. She didn't ask to watch cartoons or request a snack. She just climbed under the covers and curled up beside me like she used to when she was smaller. Back when she called me Gamma and believed the moon followed us home. I put my arm around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep. She shook her head against my side. Mommy and Daddy were talking again. My chest tightened. I waited. They think you're not thinking right, she whispered. Daddy said if you don't sign the papers, he'll tell your doctor your brain is broken. The words settled into the room like dust, impossible to sweep away. I felt my hands go cold. I didn't move. Sophie kept talking, her voice a hush in the dark. He said doctors believe stuff like that when grown-ups say it. I closed my eyes, but it didn't help. My thoughts were loud now, clattering through every memory of recent weeks, every strange look. Every time Bethany had said, "Are you sure you didn't forget?" or laughed too easily when I hesitated mid-sentence, Sophie rolled to face me. I don't think your brain is broken. I don't either, I said softly, brushing the hair from her forehead. She looked up at me, her eyes too wise for 6. Are they going to make you leave? No, sweetheart. My voice held steady, but my pulse didn't. They can't make me do anything I don't want to. Sophie tucked her head under my arm again. I stared at the ceiling, my fingers gently stroking her back. But I wasn't there in the room anymore. I was inside a future I hadn't dared imagine before. A future where my own children might try to take my name off everything I had built while convincing themselves it was love. They weren't just planning to control me. They were preparing to erase me quietly, legally, with forms and witnesses and signatures. I didn't sleep that night. Sophie did, her breath even and warm beside me, but I lay awake until the sky turned pale. D. Bethany texted me on Thursday morning. Family dinner Saturday. Just the five of us. Don't worry about cooking. We've got it covered. She added a smiley face, which somehow made it worse. I made an appointment with a lawyer for Friday. Martha had recommended Amelia West, a former colleague who specialized in elder law. When I called, I didn't mention Ryan or Bethany by name. I just said I needed to update my estate planning. The receptionist gave me a 10 a.m. slot. I told Sarah I had a doctor's appointment. Not a lie, just a different kind of checkup. Amelia's office was on the fourth floor of a renovated brick building downtown. The waiting room had dark blue chairs and framed landscape photos. No diplomas on display, no intimidation tactics. Just clean lines and fresh flowers on the reception desk. Amelia herself wasn't what I expected. Younger than me by at least 20 years, with cropped silver hair and round glasses. She didn't waste time on small talk. Mrs. Rogers, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. What can I help you with today? I'd practiced this moment in my head, how to begin without sounding paranoid or confused. But sitting there, in her office with its wall of law books and the city spread out behind her window, the words caught in my throat. Take your time, she said, her voice gentler now. I took a deep breath. My son and his wife are planning to take control of my finances. Maybe more than that. I need to protect myself. If Amelia was surprised, she didn't show it. She just nodded and picked up a pen. Tell me everything, she said. Start from the beginning. And so I did. Sophie's first whisper. The conversation I overheard. The way they'd been setting the stage, questioning my memory, planning the family dinner. Sophie's revelation about the broken brain comment. Amelia listened without interruption, taking notes in a clean spiral-bound notebook. When I was done, she leaned back and said, You're not paranoid, Mrs. Rogers. You're prudent. Something inside me loosened at her words, a knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. What do I do now? I asked. First, we review everything, she said, already pulling a legal pad toward her. Your current will, power of attorney documents, bank accounts, property deeds, anything that gives anyone access to your assets or decision-making. Then we make changes where needed. She glanced up at me. Do you have plans on Saturday? The family dinner. Good. Go to it. Don't let on that you suspect anything. Just listen. Take mental notes. And if possible, she slid her business card across the desk. Record the conversation. Ohio is a one-party consent state. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it without telling them. I picked up the card. It was heavy. Cream-colored stock with her name in simple black letters. Solid, like she was. What if they ask me to sign something? You say you need time to review it. That's all. Don't sign anything, no matter how they frame it. Tell them you'll think about it and get back to them. I nodded, tucking the card into my purse. Mrs. Rogers, Amelia said, her voice steady. What they're attempting isn't just unethical. Depending on how they proceed, it could be financial elder abuse. That's a crime. The word abuse hung in the air between us. It seemed too harsh, too ugly for what Ryan and Bethany were planning. But maybe that was the point. Maybe I needed to call it what it was. I'll see you on Monday morning, she said, standing up. After the dinner, bring anything they give you, and we'll go from there. As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of control, small but growing. By Saturday evening, the dining table had been set with cloth napkins, real glasses, candles flickering low like it was a celebration. Ryan brought in takeout from that overpriced bistro downtown and announced it like he'd cooked it himself. Sarah sat stiffly at the far end of the table, barely touching her food. Sophie was at her friend's house, conveniently out of the way. We made it through salad before Bethany put her fork down with exaggerated gentleness. "Mom," she began, her voice smooth as honey, "there's something we've been meaning to talk to you about." I nodded, my face deliberately blank. My phone lay angled slightly between the candle and the bread basket, the voice memo app silently recording. "It's just, well, we've noticed lately that things seem a little overwhelming for you. The house, the bills, everything," Ryan chimed in. "We've been thinking maybe it's time to let us help more, just to ease some pressure." Bethany reached into her tote and pulled out a manila folder. I saw it coming before it landed on the table. "These are just some simple documents," she said lightly. "Power of attorney stuff. Nothing changes unless you want it to. It's just in case, really." I picked up the papers, turned a few pages, and let my eyes move across the words without reading them. I let my hands shake just slightly as I set them down. Bethany softened her voice. "There's no pressure, Mom. We just care about you. We want to make sure you're protected." I nodded again and looked at the folder as if it were heavier than it was. "I'll need some time," I murmured, "to look it over." "Of course," Ryan said quickly. "Take all the time you need." His voice was casual, but his eyes were not. Sarah coughed lightly from her end of the table. "Maybe Mom could talk to a lawyer," she suggested, her voice barely audible, "just to understand all the implications." Bethany's smile tightened. "That's not really necessary. These are standard forms, nothing complicated." "Still," I said, finding my voice, "I'd like to think about it. Make sure I understand everything I'm signing." Ryan refilled my water glass, though it was still half full. "Absolutely, Mom. We just want what's best for you." I looked at him then, really looked at him, the sun I'd raised, the boy who once brought me dandelion bouquets and homemade cards. His eyes slid away from mine. "Thank you for thinking of me," I said quietly. And I meant it, in a way. They were thinking of me, just not in the way a child should think of their mother. After dinner, I thanked them politely for the meal and promised to read the documents over the weekend. I even smiled. Then I walked straight upstairs and locked the door. The papers Bethany had given me were exactly what I'd feared. A durable power of attorney that would give Ryan immediate financial control. Dimikumi. A healthcare proxy naming Bethany as my medical decision maker. And a document I hadn't expected, a quitclaim deed that would add both their names to my house title. If I signed, they wouldn't need to wait until I was gone to claim what was mine. I laid each page out on my bed, took photos with my phone, and then carefully replaced them in the folder. When I was done, I called Martha. "They're not even being subtle," she said after I described the documents. "The quitclaim deed is especially brazen. Did they give any reason why they should be on your house title? Protection?" I said, the word bitter on my tongue. "In case something happens to me." What happens if you sign that deed is they own your house as much as you do. You couldn't sell it without their permission. You couldn't even take out a loan against it. I pressed my fingers against my temples. I knew they wanted control, but this is like they're trying to erase me while I'm still here. "That's exactly what it is," Martha said. "Eleanor, you need to move quickly now. and you need to prepare for things to get worse before they get better. After we hung up, I sat at the window for a long time, watching the stars emerge above William's garden. The pain I felt wasn't sharp anymore. It was a dull, persistent ache, like an old injury flaring up with the changing weather. I thought of all the ways I'd supported Ryan and Bethany over the years, the checks written, the babysitting offered, the quiet stepping aside when they wanted to make changes to the house. I'd done it out of love, out of a desire to see them thrive. Never once had I imagined they'd see my generosity as weakness, but they had, and now I needed to show them it wasn't. And Monday morning arrived with a thin, cold rain. I drove myself to Amelia's office, the folder of documents on the passenger seat. Sarah had offered to come with me, but I told her to stay home. This part I needed to do alone. Amelia reviewed each page with clinical precision, her expression darkening as she got to the quitclaim deed. "This is aggressive," she said finally. "They're not just asking for oversight, they're asking for ownership." I nodded, already past surprise. "What do we do?" She looked up at me, and I could see the lawyer in her shifting into high gear. "We protect you, completely and immediately." We spent the next 3 hours rewriting my will. Nothing dramatic, I'd already divided things equally among my children, but now we added clauses, clear language protecting my independence, instructions should anyone attempt to contest my capacity. I revoked an old medical proxy Bethany had once pushed me to sign. I did. Instead, I named Sarah as co-decision maker with stipulations. If she declined, control would pass to Amelia, not another family member. When I told Amelia I'd chosen Sarah, she raised an eyebrow. She hesitated, I said, but she didn't lie. That's worth something. Next, I called the bank. I changed passwords, updated alert settings, added two-factor verification to every account. I removed Bethany from an old shared access line she hadn't touched in years, but I hadn't forgotten it was there. I closed the savings account William and I once used for emergencies. I opened a new one under my name alone. When I got home, Martha was waiting with her usual iced tea, and that look she gets when she wants to say, "I told you so," but knows better. Instead, she pulled out a folder and laid it flat on the kitchen table. "I printed transcripts from your phone recording," she said. "In triplicate, we worked until dusk, labeling, cataloging, placing copies into separate envelopes. I tucked one into the back of the spice rack, another into my desk drawer, a third went into the safe. Before I went to bed, I stood in the doorway of Sophie's room and watched her sleep, one hand curled beneath her cheek. The house was silent, but something in the air had shifted. The next time they came, I'd be ready. The petition came 2 weeks later. Bethany had filed for legal guardianship, citing concerns about my memory, my judgment, and my increased dependence on others. She attached a letter signed by Ryan, vague and self-serving, and a list of so-called incidents, none of which had ever happened. I didn't cry when I read it. I didn't even feel angry. What I felt was clarity. Amelia moved quickly. We gathered everything, my updated medical evaluation, notarized bank records, the recording from the dinner, even a letter from Sophie's teacher confirming I'd picked her up on time every time. We had dates, details, and enough documentation to sink their case before it reached the judge's bench. Sarah sat beside me on the couch when I showed her the petition. Her hands trembled as she read it. "They say you almost burned the house down by leaving the stove on," she whispered. "That you got lost driving to the grocery store. That you sometimes don't recognize Sophie." I nodded, watching her face. "None of this happened," she said, the paper crinkling under her tightening grip. "None of it." "I know." She looked up at me, her eyes suddenly fierce. "I'm going to testify," she said. "For you, against them." I reached for her hand. "It'll cost you." "It already has," her voice cracked. I kept quiet when I should have spoken. I looked away when I should have looked closer. "I'm not doing that anymore." I pulled her into my arms then. This daughter who had always seemed smaller than her brother, quieter in her needs. But there was nothing small about her courage now, Jata said. 3 days before the hearing, Ryan came to see me alone. He knocked on my bedroom door after dinner, his face a careful mask of concern. "Mom," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway, "can we talk?" I gestured to the chair by the window. He sat, his large frame somehow diminished in the fading light. "This has gotten out of hand," he began. "The lawyers, the court date. It doesn't have to be this way." I waited, hands folded in my lap. "We're worried about you. That's all this is. You've been different lately, forgetful, sometimes confused." "Have I?" My voice was calm. "Yes," he insisted. "The other day, you couldn't remember where you put your glasses, and last month, you missed your doctor's appointment." I smiled slightly. My glasses were on top of my head, Ryan, and I didn't miss the appointment. It was rescheduled. The office called me directly. He shifted in his seat. "There have been other things, small things, maybe, but they add up to what a mother who needs to be controlled, a grandmother who can't be trusted with her own life." "That's not fair," he said, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. I leaned forward. "What's not fair is filing false claims about my mental capacity. What's not fair is trying to take my house out from under me while I'm still living in it." He flinched. "The quitclaim deed was Bethany's idea. She thought—" "I know what she thought." I cut in. "What I don't understand is why you agreed." Ryan was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller than I'd heard it in years. "We're underwater, Mom. The market crashed last year, and Bethany lost 3 major sales. The credit cards are maxed out again. Sophie's school raised tuition. We're barely keeping our heads above water." I felt a flicker of the old sympathy, the mother's instinct to rescue. But behind it came something harder, clearer. "So you decided to take what's mine?" "No," he protested. "We decided to consolidate, to make sure everything stays in the family, to protect you and us at the same time. By lying about my mental health, by trying to declare me incompetent." He had the grace to look ashamed. "That was a mistake. We'll withdraw the petition." "It's too late for that," I said quietly. "The hearing is in 3 days. I'll see you there." He stood, shoulders slumped. "Mom, please, we can work this out privately, as a family." I looked up at him, this son I had loved since before he drew breath. "We stopped being a family the moment you decided to take rather than ask. The moment you chose to lie rather than face the truth of what you were doing." "I never meant to hurt you," he said, his voice breaking. And that, at least, I believed. He hadn't meant to hurt me. He'd only meant to take what was mine and justify it as protection. The hurt was just collateral damage. "I know," I said. "But you did, and now we have to face the consequences." After he left, I sat for a long time in the growing dark, remembering the little boy who once climbed into my lap with skinned knees and tearful eyes, looking to me to make it better. I couldn't make this better. Not for him. Not this time. This time, he would have to face what he'd done, and so would I. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold. I'd barely slept, but it didn't matter. Some days run on adrenaline rather than rest. I dressed with care a navy suit I'd worn to William's funeral, pearl earrings he'd given me on our 30th anniversary, sensible shoes that wouldn't betray my nerves with an unexpected wobble. In the mirror, I saw a woman who looked older than I remembered, but steadier than I felt. You look nice, Sarah said from the doorway. She was already dressed, a cream blouse and dark slacks, her hair pulled back neatly. Professional. That's the idea, I replied, adjusting my collar. I want the judge to see a competent woman, not a confused old lady. Sarah stepped into the room, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. No one who spends 5 minutes with you could think you're confused. Mom, I turned to face her. But that's just it. The judge won't have 5 minutes. He'll have statements and affidavits and expert opinions. Ryan and Bethany have been building their case for months. We've had weeks. We have the truth, she said simply. I smiled at that. My practical daughter, always finding the shortest distance between 2 points. Yes, I agreed. We do have that. Downstairs, Martha waited with a thermos of coffee and a folder of last-minute documents Amelia had asked her to bring. Ready, she asked. Though she knew the answer, I nodded, taking the thermos, as I'll ever be. As we walked to the car, I glanced back at the house the home William and I had bought when Ryan was just learning to walk, the place where I'd planted daffodils every fall for 40 years. I wondered, briefly, if this would be the last time I saw it as truly mine. The county courthouse was an imposing limestone structure with wide steps and tall columns. Inside, the hallways echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. We found Amelia waiting outside courtroom 3, her silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a leather briefcase at her feet. "Good morning, Mrs. Rogers," she said. "All business now. Any last-minute questions before we go in?" I shook my head. We'd been over everything repeatedly, what to expect, what to say, how to respond if Ryan's lawyer tried to provoke me. "Just remember," Amelia said, lowering her voice. "Stay calm, no matter what they claim. Answer directly and honestly. Don't elaborate unless I ask you to. And most importantly, look at the judge when you speak, not at Ryan or Bethany." The courtroom doors opened, and a bailiff called our case number. As we filed in, I caught sight of Ryan and Bethany already seated at the opposite table. Ryan looked up as I entered, his face a mask of practiced concern. Bethany kept her eyes down, fingers nervously adjusting papers before her. I didn't acknowledge them, couldn't. The space between us felt charged with too many unspoken words. The judge, an older man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, entered shortly after. We all rose, then sat at his instruction. The proceedings began with a brief summary of the petition Ryan and Bethany Rogers seeking guardianship over Eleanor Rogers due to concerns about diminished capacity and vulnerability to financial exploitation. Their lawyer, a sleek woman in her 40s with an immaculate bob, presented their case first. She spoke of concerning patterns of behavior, increasing confusion, and vulnerability. She mentioned my age repeatedly, as if 70 itself was evidence of incompetence. I kept my face neutral, hands folded on the table, just as Amelia had advised. But inside, something hot and fierce was building with each false claim. "Mrs. Rogers frequently gets lost while driving familiar routes," the lawyer stated. "She has left the stove on unattended, creating fire hazards. She sometimes fails to recognize her own granddaughter." Beside me, Sarah stiffened. I placed a hand on her knee, a silent request for patience. "These behaviors indicate a decline that puts Mrs. Rogers at risk," the lawyer continued. "The petitioners are simply trying to ensure her safety and financial security." When it was Amelia's turn, she rose unhurriedly, straightening her jacket with deliberate calm. "Your Honor," she began, What we have here is not a case of diminished capacity, but a transparent attempt at financial control disguised as concern. She methodically dismantled each claim. The getting lost incident never happened, and she had my spotless driving record to prove it. The stove left on also fabricated, and she had a recent inspection report from the gas company showing everything in working order. Failing to recognize Sophie, she presented a letter from Sophie's teacher confirming I picked up my granddaughter 3 times a week without incident or confusion. Furthermore, Amelia continued, Mrs. Rogers recently underwent a comprehensive cognitive assessment. She submitted the report a perfect score on every test. As you can see, there is absolutely no evidence of cognitive decline or memory issues. The judge reviewed the document carefully, his expression giving nothing away. Now, Amelia said, her voice taking on an edge, let's discuss what this case is really about. She played the recording from our family dinner, Ryan and Bethany's careful framing of the power of attorney as just in case, Bethany's insistence that I didn't need a lawyer to review the documents, Sarah's quiet suggestion that I should get independent advice. Then she presented the documents themselves, the power of attorney, the healthcare proxy, and most damning of all, the quitclaim deed. Your Honor, Amelia said, the petitioners weren't seeking protection for Mrs. Rogers. They were seeking control of her assets, specifically her home, which is fully paid off and worth approximately $450,000 in today's market. The judge turned to Ryan and Bethany's lawyer. Would you care to address this evidence, counselor? The lawyer conferred briefly with Ryan and Bethany, their whispers urgent and strained. When she faced the judge again, her confidence had visibly dimmed. Your Honor, the quitclaim deed was suggested as a way to protect the family home, to ensure it remained in the family. There was no intent to deprive Mrs. Rogers of her property. And yet, the judge noted, looking over his glasses, that would be the practical effect, would it not? The lawyer had no satisfactory answer. When it was Sarah's turn to testify, she walked to the witness stand with her shoulders squared, though I could see the tremor in her hands. She swore to tell the truth, then sat, adjusting her blouse with nervous fingers. Ms. Rogers, Amelia began gently, can you describe your mother's daily routine and capabilities as you've observed them? Sarah cleared her throat. My mother is completely independent. She manages her own schedule, her own finances, her own medical appointments. She cooks, she drives, she reads constantly. She takes care of Sophie 3 days a week while my brother and sister-in-law work. Have you ever observed the concerning behaviors the petitioners have described? Getting lost, leaving appliances on, failing to recognize family members? Never, Sarah said firmly. Not once. Did your brother or sister-in-law ever express these concerns to you before filing this petition? Sarah hesitated, then squared her shoulders. They told me they were worried about Mom's memory, but when I asked for specific examples, they were vague. They mentioned Mom forgetting where she put her glasses or missing an appointment normal. Everyday things that happen to everyone. Did they discuss their plans to seek guardianship with you? No, she said, her voice stronger now. They told me they wanted to help Mom manage her finances, just in case. They never mentioned a guardianship petition. Ms. Rogers, Amelia continued, did you ever hear your brother or sister-in-law discuss financial motivations for their concern about your mother? Sarah looked directly at Ryan then, for the first time since entering the courtroom. Yes, she said quietly. I overheard Ryan telling Bethany that they needed to secure Mom's assets before anything happened. This was before they ever mentioned concerns about her memory. A muscle worked in Ryan's jaw. Bethany stared fixedly at the table. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my head high. The oath felt weighty on my tongue, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, words to live by. Amelia's questions were straightforward, designed to demonstrate my clarity and competence. I answered each one directly, my voice steady. I described my daily life, my financial management, my relationship with my family. I explained how I'd supported Ryan and Bethany over the years, the loans, the gift money, the child care. Mrs. Rogers, Amelia asked, when did you first become aware that your son and daughter-in-law were concerned about your mental capacity? I wasn't aware, I replied, until my granddaughter told me they were planning to take my money and later that they thought my brain was broken. And how did you respond to this information? I was shocked, of course, and hurt, but mostly I was confused. I hadn't experienced any memory problems or confusion. There was no reason for them to be concerned. What did you do next? I sought legal advice. I wanted to understand my options and protect myself. Mrs. Rogers, Amelia said, her voice gentle now, why do you believe your son and daughter-in-law have filed this petition? I looked directly at the judge, not at Ryan or Bethany. I believe they are experiencing financial difficulties and see my assets, particularly my home, as a solution to their problems. Ryan's lawyer objected, claiming speculation, but the judge overruled. The witness is stating her belief based on her direct experiences and conversations, he said. Continue, Mrs. Rogers. I've always helped my children when they needed it, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I've never turned them away. If they had asked for help, we could have discussed options. Instead, they chose to try to take control without my knowledge or consent. And how has this affected you? Amelia asked. I paused, considering my words carefully. It has broken my trust. It has made me feel unsafe in my own home. And it has forced me to defend my autonomy at an age when I should be able to rely on my children's support, not fear their intentions. The cross-examination was brief and ineffective. Ryan's lawyer tried to suggest I was paranoid, that I'd misinterpreted innocent concerns, but each attempt fell flat against the evidence and my calm, clear responses. When the testimony concluded, the judge called a brief recess. As he left the courtroom, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Ryan and Bethany. My son's face was ashen. His usual confidence crumbled. Bethany was whispering urgently to their lawyer, her gestures sharp with frustration. Sarah touched my arm. You were amazing, Mom, she whispered. I didn't feel amazing. I felt tired, bone-deep tired. This wasn't a victory, no matter how the judge ruled. It was a fracture in the foundation of our family, and I wasn't sure it could ever be fully repaired. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. He adjusted his glasses, reviewed his notes, and then looked up, his gaze moving between the two tables. I've considered the evidence and testimony presented today, he began. Guardianship is an extreme measure designed to protect individuals who truly cannot protect themselves. It removes fundamental rights and autonomy. As such, it requires clear and convincing evidence of necessity. He turned to Ryan and Bethany. The petitioners have failed to provide such evidence. In fact, the evidence presented suggests strongly that Mrs. Eleanor Rogers is fully competent to manage her own affairs. Relief washed through me, cool and clean. Furthermore, the judge continued, his tone hardening, I find the petitioner's actions concerning. The attempt to obtain a quitclaim deed, coupled with unfounded claims about Mrs. Rogers' mental capacity, suggests motives beyond genuine concern for her welfare. He looked directly at me then. Mrs. Rogers, this court finds no basis for the guardianship petition. It is hereby dismissed. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo in my chest. It was over. I had won, but as I looked across at my son's defeated face, I knew that in another, deeper way, we had all lost. Ed. Outside the courthouse, the October air was crisp, the sky a clear, distant blue. Martha hugged me briefly, whispering, "Well done," before heading to her car. Amelia shook my hand, promising to call tomorrow to discuss next steps. Sarah stood beside me, her arm linked through mine, a silent anchor. I was watching a flock of pigeons scatter and regroup on the courthouse steps when Ryan approached. He was alone. Bethany had hurried away as soon as the hearing ended, her heels clicking angrily down the marble hallway. "Mom," he said, his voice rough. "Can we talk?" Sarah tensed beside me. "I don't think now is the time. Ryan, please," he said, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard in years, a vulnerability that reminded me of the boy he'd been, not the man he'd become. I nodded to Sarah. "It's all right. I'll meet you at the car." She hesitated, then squeezed my arm and walked away, glancing back twice as she went. Ryan and I stood in awkward silence, the space between us vast and unfamiliar. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "It got out of hand. We never meant—" "Yes, you did." I interrupted gently. "You meant exactly what you did. You just didn't expect to be caught." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "We're in trouble, Mom, real trouble. The business isn't doing well. Bethany's last 3 big sales fell through. We're behind on the mortgage, maxed out on credit cards. Sophie's school raised tuition again. And you thought taking my house was the solution?" "We didn't see it that way," he insisted. "We thought we could manage everything better, together, keep it all in the family. By lying to a judge about my mental capacity, by trying to declare me incompetent." He had no answer for that. "Ryan," I said, softening my tone, "I've always helped when you needed it. All you had to do was ask." "Would you have given us the house?" he asked bluntly. And there it was, the truth at last. "No," I said, "I wouldn't have, because it's my home, not a financial resource for you to tap when you're overextended, but I would have helped in other ways that didn't involve taking everything I have." He nodded, resignation settling over his features. "Bethany won't see it that way. She's practical, always has been." "Practical," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it now?" A flicker of defiance crossed his face. "You don't understand the pressure we're under. The school expects certain things. The neighborhood, the social circle. It costs to maintain that life." "Then perhaps it's not the life you should be living," I said. "Your father and I never cared about impressing anyone. We just wanted a home where our children felt safe and loved." "It's different now," he insisted. "Everything costs more. The competition is fiercer. Some things never change. Ryan, the cost of betrayal, for instance, that's always been steep." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "What happens now?" he asked after a moment. "Now," I said, suddenly weary beyond words. "I go home, and you and Bethany need to find somewhere else to live." His head snapped up. "You're evicting us." "I'm reclaiming my home," I corrected. "You have 30 days to find a new place. I'll help with the security deposit and first month's rent as a gift. Not alone. After that, you're on your own. And Sophie," his voice cracked on his daughter's name. "Sophie is always welcome in my life," I said firmly. "But that's a conversation for another day, when things are calmer." He nodded, defeat evident in every line of his body. As he turned to go, I called after him. "Ryan." He paused, looking back. "I still love you," I said. "That hasn't changed, but love without trust is just sentiment, and I don't know how to trust you again." He didn't answer. Perhaps there was nothing left to say. I watched him walk away, my son who had grown into a stranger, and felt the weight of everything we'd lost, not just today, but in all the small compromises that had led us here. The easy assumption that I would give and give until nothing remained. The gradual erosion of respect. The slow transformation of love into entitlement. When I reached the car, Sarah was waiting, her face a question. "It's done," I said simply. "Let's go home." But even as I said it, I knew that home would never be the same again. Chum. The next week passed in a strange, suspended state. Ryan and Bethany moved through the house like ghosts, avoiding common areas when I was present, speaking in hushed tones behind closed doors. Sophie, sensing the tension, grew quieter, her usual exuberance dimmed. I found her sitting on the back steps one afternoon, watching a line of ants with solemn concentration. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, easing down beside her. "What are you looking at?" "The ants are moving house," she said, pointing to where the tiny creatures were carrying crumbs and bits of leaf. "They're taking everything important." I nodded, hearing the unspoken question. Sometimes people move houses too. It doesn't mean they're leaving behind the important things. She looked up at me, her eyes serious. "Are we moving because you're mad at Daddy and Mommy?" "I'm not mad, Sophie," I said carefully. "I'm sad about some choices they made. But yes, they're looking for a new place for you all to live." "Will it be far away?" "No, honey, they're looking at places close to your school." She considered this, her small brow furrowed. "Will I still see you?" "Of course you will," I said firmly. "I'm still your grandmother. Nothing changes that, ever. Promise, I promise." I wrapped an arm around her narrow shoulders. "Some things are forever." "Sophie, my love for you is one of those things." She leaned against me, seemingly satisfied. We sat together, watching the ants in their orderly procession, each carrying a burden many times its size with determined purpose. That evening, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table, drinking tea and making lists, practical tasks to focus on changing locks, updating accounts, revising my will again to include protective clauses Amelia had suggested. "Have you thought about what you'll do with the house?" Sarah asked. "It's big for just one person." I looked around the kitchen, the worn countertops William and I had installed ourselves, the height marks on the door frame tracking our children's growth, the window over the sink that framed the garden perfectly in summer. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "It's full of memories, but also shadows now." Sarah nodded, understanding. "You could sell it, buy something smaller, easier to maintain." "Maybe," I said, "but not right away. I need time to think, to feel what's right." She covered my hand with hers. "Whatever you decide, I'll help." I squeezed her fingers, grateful for this daughter who had found her strength when it mattered most. "What about you?" I asked. "Will you stay in the apartment?" She shook her head. "It doesn't feel right anymore. Too close, too many echoes. I've been looking at rentals near the community college. There's a teaching position opening up in the spring semester. English literature." I smiled. "You always loved books." "I did," she agreed. "Maybe it's time to get back to the things we love, instead of just surviving." We sat in companionable silence, the kitchen clock ticking steadily, marking time in a house that had seen so much of it joy and grief, beginnings and endings, betrayal and, perhaps someday, forgiveness. But not yet. Not for a long while yet. Bethany came to see me 3 days later. She knocked on my bedroom door just after breakfast, her face carefully composed, her designer outfit impeccable as always. "Eleanor," she said, formal as a stranger, "may I speak with you?" I gestured to the chair by the window, the same one Ryan had sat in before the hearing. She perched on the edge, spine straight, hands clasped in her lap. "Ryan tells me you've asked us to leave," she began, her voice controlled. "Yes," I confirmed. By the end of the month, she nodded, as if this was exactly what she'd expected. I want you to know that this situation could have been avoided if you'd been more reasonable about sharing, I interrupted, my voice sharper than intended. Is that what you call trying to take control of my house and finances? Sharing, a flush crept up her neck. We were trying to protect the family assets. They're not family assets, Bethany. They're my assets, earned over a lifetime with William. Mine to use, to save, or to give as I choose. And you've chosen not to help your own son when he's struggling, she said, accusation hardening her tone. I regarded her steadily. I've helped Ryan many times over the years, paid off credit cards, contributed to your business startup, covered Sophie's tuition. What I've never done is sign over my home or give either of you unrestricted access to my savings. Because you don't trust us. I did trust you, I corrected, until you gave me reason not to. She looked away, her perfect profile silhouetted against the morning light. We were desperate, she said finally, her voice quieter now. The market crashed last year. 3 major clients backed out. The credit card debt. She trailed off. Why didn't you just ask for help? I pressed. Directly, honestly. She met my eyes then, and I saw something I hadn't expected: vulnerability, maybe even shame. Because we've already asked so many times. Because it never fixes anything permanently. Because eventually, everyone gets tired of helping. I understood suddenly that Bethany's fear wasn't just about money, it was about abandonment, about the floor giving way beneath her feet. I remembered vaguely that she'd grown up with a single mother who'd struggled financially, who'd moved them from apartment to apartment as leases ended and rent increased. I wouldn't have turned you away, I said gently, but I needed to be asked, not manipulated. She nodded, a small concession. We found a townhouse near Sophie's school. It's smaller than what we have here, but it will work. I'm glad, I said. As I told Ryan, I'll help with the security deposit and first month's rent. Why would you do that? She asked, genuine confusion in her voice. After everything, because you're still family, I replied simply, even when it's complicated. She stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced hands. I don't understand you, Eleanor. I don't think I ever have. Maybe that's been part of the problem, I suggested. You saw what you expected to see: a convenient grandmother, a financial safety net, not a person with her own needs and boundaries. And now we start over, I said, with clearer boundaries and hopefully more honest conversations. She nodded again, though whether in agreement or just acknowledgement, I couldn't tell. As she reached the door, she paused. Sophie loves you, she said, not turning around. That won't change. I know, I replied. And I love her. That won't change either. After she left, I sat for a long time, watching the pattern of sunlight shift across the floor. There was sadness in me, yes, but also a strange sense of liberation. For years, I'd measured my worth by what I could give, by how I could smooth the path for my children. Now, I was learning to stand in my own value, unapologetic and firm. It was uncomfortable, this new footing, but also necessary. That evening, I called Martha and asked her to come over on Saturday. Bring a clipboard, I said, and your practical eye. I need to make some decisions about this house. As I hung up, I felt a flutter of anticipation beneath the lingering hurt. Something was ending. Yes, but something else was beginning. The house sold faster than I expected. Good bones, the real estate agent said with professional enthusiasm. I smiled at that phrase. I'd spent decades holding those bones together, even after William was gone. Martha helped me sort through 40 years of accumulated life, separating what to keep, what to donate, what to pass on to family. We worked methodically, room by room, box by box. Sometimes the process was purely practical kitchen gadgets and outdated electronics. Other times, it was like archaeological excavation, unearthing layers of memory with each open drawer or closet. William's collection of pocket watches, tarnished but still ticking. The children's report cards and artwork, carefully preserved in albums, photo albums chronicling family vacations, graduations, birthdays, Sophie's first pair of shoes, impossibly tiny now. Keep or donate? Martha would ask, holding up each item. Sometimes the answer was obvious. Other times, I had to sit with the object in my hands, feeling its weight, listening to what it had to tell me about who I had been and who I wanted to become. By the end of 2 weeks, the house looked strange to me, half-empty rooms echoing with footsteps, walls bare of familiar pictures. It felt like the house was already saying goodbye, making room for the next family who would fill it with their own stories. Ryan, Bethany, and Sophie had moved out the previous weekend. The farewell had been awkward, strained with unspoken emotions. Sophie had clung to me, making me promise again that she would still see me often. Ryan had carried boxes with mechanical efficiency, barely meeting my eyes. Bethany had been coolly polite, checking each room twice to ensure they'd left nothing behind. Only Sarah had stayed to help with the packing. Her presence a quiet comfort as we dismantled the home that had sheltered us both for so long. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" she asked one evening as we sat among half-filled boxes in the living room. "Selling the house, moving to Lakeside Pines." I nodded, feeling more certain with each passing day. It's time for something new, something that's just mine. Lakeside Pines was a small community for seniors on the outskirts of town, not a nursing home or assisted living facility, but a collection of individual cottages with shared gardens and a community center. I'd visited twice and been drawn to the quiet dignity of the place, the sense of both privacy and connection. But it's so far from everything, Sarah worried. From Sophie, from me. "It's 20 minutes by car," I reminded her gently. "Less when there's no traffic. And I'll still have my car. I'm not disappearing, just relocating." She nodded, though her brow remained furrowed. "I just worry about you being alone. I've been alone in this house for 3 years since your father died." I pointed out. "At least at Lakeside, I'll have neighbors who check in, activities if I want them, help nearby if I need it." "I know," she sighed. "It's just another change, on top of everything else." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Change isn't always bad, Sarah. Sometimes it's exactly what we need." The cottage at Lakeside Pines was nothing like my old home, smaller, newer, with none of the creaks and quirks of a house that had weathered 4 decades of family life, but it had large windows that filled the rooms with light, a small but efficient kitchen, and most importantly, a garden plot out back. The day I moved in, Sarah helped arrange furniture and hang curtains. Martha brought lunch and practical housewarming gifts, new towels, a set of keys on a bright red keychain, a doormat that said "Welcome" in cheerful yellow letters. By evening, when they had both gone home, I stood in the center of my new living room and felt not at home, not yet, but not adrift either. This space was a blank page, ready for whatever story I chose to write next. The following morning, I woke early out of habit. The cottage was quiet, the bedroom unfamiliar in the pre-dawn light. I made coffee in the new kitchen, then took it outside to the small patio that faced east. The air was cool, fragrant with pine from the nearby woods. A pair of cardinals flitted from tree to tree at the edge of the property. In the distance, I could just make out the glimmer of the lake that gave the community its name. I sat watching the sunrise, the sky gradually lightening from indigo to lavender to gold. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, not happiness, exactly, but a kind of acceptance. This was where I was now. This was who I was becoming. Later that day, I met some of my neighbors, a retired teacher named Gloria, who lived 2 doors down, a couple in their 70s who invited me to join their weekly card game, a former librarian who recommended the community garden as the best therapy in the world. I signed up for a garden plot that afternoon. The community coordinator, a cheerful woman named Diane, showed me the available spaces. "This one gets good morning sun," she said, pointing to a rectangle of dark earth near the edge of the communal area. "Perfect for tomatoes, if you're a tomato person." "My husband was the tomato person," I said. "I've always been partial to herbs and flowers myself." "Then you'll want some afternoon shade." She nodded, leading me to another plot. "This one might suit you better." I looked at the empty soil, already imagining it filled with rosemary and thyme, maybe some lavender along the border, a clean slate waiting for new growth. "This one," I agreed. "This one feels right." Sophie came to visit the following weekend. Sarah dropped her off Saturday morning, promising to return Sunday afternoon. It was our first overnight visit since everything had changed, and I'd prepared carefully new sheets on the pull-out sofa in the second bedroom, Sophie's favorite cereal in the pantry, a children's book about gardening that I thought might interest her. She explored the cottage with the unfiltered curiosity of a 6-year-old, opening cabinets, peering into closets, testing the firmness of couch cushions. "It's small," she declared finally, standing in the center of the living room with her hands on her hips. "Yes," I agreed. "Just enough space for me, and sometimes me," she added, looking up for confirmation. "Absolutely. There will always be space for you here." Satisfied, she moved on to the back patio, where she discovered a small blue ceramic pot I'd placed on the table. "What's this?" she asked, touching the dirt inside tentatively. "That's for you," I explained. "I thought we could plant something together, something you could watch grow whenever you visit." Her face brightened. "Like what?" "That's for you to decide. I have some seeds we can look at." We spent the morning poring over seed packets, discussing the merits of marigolds versus zinnias, whether strawberries needed too much attention between visits. Eventually, Sophie settled on sunflowers. "Because they're taller than people, Grandma." As we carefully pressed the black and white striped seeds into the soil, Sophie's small fingers working with surprising delicacy, she asked unexpectedly, "Are you still mad at Daddy and Mommy?" I paused, considering how to answer truthfully without burdening her. "I'm not mad exactly. I'm sad about some things that happened, but I'm working on it." She nodded, patting the soil with serious concentration. "Daddy's sad too. I heard him telling Mommy he misses you." Something twisted in my chest pain. Yes, but also a flicker of hope. I miss him too. Sometimes. The way things used to be. Can it be that way again? "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. Sometimes when things break, they can't go back to exactly how they were before, but that doesn't mean they can't heal into something new. She considered this, her young face thoughtful beyond her years. "Like when my toy robot broke, and Daddy fixed it, but the arm works different now." "Something like that?" I smiled. "It's still your robot, still valuable and loved, just changed." She seemed satisfied with this explanation and returned to the task at hand, carefully watering the newly planted seeds with a child-sized watering can I'd bought for her. That night, After a dinner of pizza and ice cream grandmotherly prerogatives I intended to maintain, we sat on the sofa looking through old photo albums I'd kept. Sophie was particularly fascinated by pictures of her father as a child. "Daddy was little," she giggled, pointing to a photo of Ryan at about her age, missing his front teeth and grinning widely. "He was," I confirmed. "Just like you are now." "Was he good?" The question caught me off guard. "Good? Like, did he listen and pick up his toys and stuff?" I smiled, remembering. "Not always. He was very spirited. That means he had lots of energy and ideas, and sometimes he forgot the rules." "Like me," she said with satisfaction. "Very much like you." I agreed, tapping her nose gently. We turned more pages, moving through Ryan's high school graduation, Sarah's college years, William and me on our 30th anniversary trip. "I miss Grandpa," Sophie said suddenly, touching a photo of William holding her as an infant. "Even though I don't really remember him, I miss him too," I said softly. "Every day." "Is that why you're alone now? Because you miss Grandpa?" I closed the album gently, giving myself time to find the right words. "I'm alone because it's what I need right now, to figure out who I am without taking care of everyone else all the time." She leaned against me, small and warm. "But you still take care of me?" "Always," I promised, kissing the top of her head. That's the special thing about grandmas. We never stop loving and caring, even when everything else changes. Dad. The seasons turned, as they always do. Fall deepened into winter, the garden plots covered with straw for protection against the cold. My cottage grew more familiar with each passing day, no longer new. Not quite home yet, but increasingly mine in all the ways that mattered. I established routines: morning coffee on the patio when weather permitted, or by the front window when it didn't, Tuesday afternoon bridge games with Gloria and the Hendersons, Friday morning volunteer hours at the community library, regular visits with Sophie, sometimes at my cottage, sometimes at the park halfway between our homes. Sarah came for dinner once a week, usually Thursdays. She'd started teaching at the community college and seemed to be finding her footing in a new direction. We talked about books and films, about her students and colleagues, carefully avoiding the still tender subject of Ryan and Bethany. Until one Thursday in late January, when she arrived for dinner with unusual tension in her shoulders. "Ryan called me," she said as we were clearing the dinner plates. "He wants to see you." I set down the serving bowl I was holding, suddenly aware of my quickened pulse. "Did he say why?" She shook her head. "Just that he's been doing a lot of thinking, and he'd like to talk. If you're willing." I moved to the sink, turning on the water more for the familiar sound than any immediate need to wash dishes. "And what do you think I should do?" Sarah leaned against the counter, her expression careful. "I think that's entirely up to you. Mom, you don't owe him anything." "But," she sighed, "but he's your son, and he sounded different, less defensive, more like the brother I used to know." I nodded, letting the water run over my hands, warm and grounding. "I'll think about it." And I did think about it for nearly a week. I thought about it during my morning coffee, during bridge games, during quiet evenings with a book. I thought about Ryan as he'd been at the courthouse, desperate, defensive, unable to meet my eyes. I thought about him as a child, as a teenager, as a young man bringing Bethany home to meet us for the first time. I thought about William, what he would say if he were here. "Forgiveness isn't for them, Ellie," he'd probably tell me, using the nickname only he ever used. "It's for you, so you don't have to carry it anymore." Finally, I called Sarah. "Tell Ryan I'll meet him," I said, "but not here, not yet, somewhere neutral." We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown the following Saturday. I arrived early, claiming a corner table with a clear view of the door. I ordered tea and waited, trying to calm the flutter of nerves in my stomach. When Ryan walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight, and there was gray at his temples I hadn't noticed before. He scanned the cafe, spotted me, and approached with uncharacteristic hesitancy. "Mom," he said, standing awkwardly beside the table. "Thank you for meeting me." I gestured to the chair across from mine. "Sit down, Ryan." He did, removing his coat and draping it over the back of the chair. A waitress came by, and he ordered coffee, black. We sat in silence until she returned with his drink. "How are you?" he asked finally, wrapping his hands around the mug. "I'm well," I replied. "Settled in at Lakeside, making friends, keeping busy." He nodded. "Sarah mentioned you're volunteering at the library. Just a few hours a week, shelving books, helping with children's story time. It's pleasant." Another silence, longer this time. Ryan stared into his coffee as if it might offer guidance. "I've been seeing someone," he said abruptly. "A therapist. I mean," this surprised me. Ryan had always dismissed therapy as paying strangers to listen to your problems. "It was Bethany's idea, actually," he continued. "After everything. She said we needed help, professionally, and she was right." I waited, giving him space to find his way. "I've been looking at patterns," he said. "Things I learned growing up. Things I've been repeating without even realizing it." He glanced up briefly. Dad was always so focused on providing, on making sure we had everything we needed, more than he had growing up. I nodded. William had been raised in relative poverty, the son of a factory worker who'd lost his job during layoffs. He'd worked incredibly hard to give our children a different kind of security. "I took that lesson and twisted it," Ryan admitted, "turned it into something toxic. It wasn't just about providing anymore. It was about status, about looking successful even when we weren't, about maintaining an image at any cost." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my throat tighten. "We're selling the house," he said. "The new one. I mean, it's too expensive, and we're trying to get out from under the debt. We found an apartment that's within our actual budget." "That sounds sensible," I said carefully. "Sensible," he repeated with a faint smile. "Not a word I've heard associated with my decisions lately." Another silence fell, but less strained now. "I've missed you, Mom," he said finally, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "I've missed who we used to be together." I felt the careful wall I'd built begin to crack. "I've missed that too. I know I can't undo what happened," he continued. "The things I said, the things I tried to do, I can't take back the hurt I caused." "No," I agreed quietly. "You can't, but I'm trying to understand it, to make sure I never do anything like that again." He hesitated. "And I'm hoping, eventually, you might be able to forgive me." I looked at my son, my flawed, struggling, human son, and felt the complicated tangle of love and hurt that had been with me for months. "Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Ryan," I said finally. "It's a process, for both of us. I'm working on it, but I'm not there yet." He nodded, accepting this without protest. "Can we start over? Not pretend nothing happened, but try to build something new." I thought about the sunflowers Sophie and I had planted, now dormant under winter soil, but waiting for spring to grow again. Different from what was before, but still valuable, still alive. "We can try," I said. Slowly. Relief softened his face. "That's all I'm asking for, a chance to try." We talked for another hour, careful, measured conversation about his therapy, about Sophie's school, about the changes we were both making in our lives. Not yet comfortable, but no longer impossible. A beginning. When we parted, he asked hesitantly if he could hug me. I nodded, and he embraced me briefly, his arms thinner than I remembered, but still strong. "Thank you," he whispered before letting go. I watched him walk away, feeling something shift inside me, not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps its first green shoot breaking through hard ground. Spring came early that year. By mid-March, the garden plots at Lakeside were being turned and prepared, winter coverings removed to reveal the awakening soil beneath. Sophie's sunflower seeds, which we'd stored carefully over the winter, were ready for planting again. "Right here," she directed, pointing to the corner of my plot nearest the path. "So everyone can see them when they get super tall." I smiled, helping her dig small holes at the proper spacing. "They'll be the talk of the garden." "Grandma," she said as we worked, "guess what Daddy and Mommy don't fight as much anymore?" I glanced at her, careful to keep my expression neutral. "Is that so?" She nodded emphatically. "And we moved to a new house where I can walk to the park. It's smaller, but I like it better. My room is yellow." "That sounds lovely," I said, genuinely pleased that things seemed more stable for her. "And Daddy said maybe you could come see it sometime, if you want to." I paused in my digging, considering it had been 4 months since my coffee with Ryan. We'd met several more times, always in neutral locations, always with clear boundaries. Each conversation had been a little easier than the last, though we still carefully avoided certain topics. Bethany remained a more distant figure. She was polite when dropping off or picking up Sophie, but our interactions were brief and formal. I wasn't sure if we'd ever find our way back to something warmer. "I'd like that," I told Sophie. "Maybe soon," she beamed, returning to the task of planting with renewed enthusiasm. We finished the sunflowers and moved on to the herbs I'd selected: rosemary, thyme, mint in a separate container to control its spreading habit. As we worked, other gardeners came and went around us. Gloria waved from her plot across the path, where she was planting rows of lettuce and spinach. Mr. Henderson stopped to admire our work and offer Sophie a wrapped caramel from his pocket, with a questioning glance at me for permission first. It struck me suddenly, watching Sophie chatting animatedly with my new neighbors, that I had created something here. Not just a garden, but a community, a place where I belonged on my own terms, not as someone's mother or grandmother or widow, but as Eleanor, just Eleanor. The realization settled in me like a seed, finding its perfect depth in rich soil. Then, I visited Ryan and Bethany's new apartment on a Sunday afternoon in April. I brought a houseplant as a housewarming gift, a peace lily, which seemed appropriately symbolic without being too obvious about it. Sarah came with me, a buffer we all still needed. The apartment was indeed smaller than their previous home, but bright and thoughtfully arranged. Sophie proudly gave me a tour, ending with her yellow bedroom, where drawings and school papers were displayed on a corkboard beside her bed. "And look," she exclaimed, pointing to the windowsill where a small pot sat in the sunlight. "I'm growing sunflowers here too, just like at your house. They're coming up beautifully," I told her, noting the tiny green sprouts just breaking through the soil. Dinner was a careful affair conversation kept to safe topics. Everyone a little too polite, a little too cautious. But beneath the awkwardness, I sensed something genuine in Ryan's efforts, in Bethany's more subdued but present attempts to make me comfortable. After dinner, while Sarah helped Sophie with bath time, I found myself alone in the living room with Ryan and Bethany. The moment stretched, taut with unspoken words. "Your apartment is lovely," I said finally, breaking the silence. "You've made it very homey." "It's smaller than we're used to," Bethany acknowledged. "But it's teaching us what we really need versus what we just thought we needed." I nodded, understanding the distinction all too well. Mom, Ryan said, leaning forward slightly, I want you to know that we're working through things, both of us, together. I'm glad to hear that, I said simply, and we want to apologize. He continued, formally, explicitly, for everything that happened, for betraying your trust, for trying to take what wasn't ours to take. Bethany nodded, her usual composure cracking slightly. It was wrong, she said quietly. All of it. We were desperate and afraid, but that's no excuse. I looked at them both, my son and the woman he'd chosen, the parents of my beloved granddaughter, and felt the hard kernel of hurt I'd carried for so long begin to soften, just slightly. Thank you, I said. That means a great deal to me. We don't expect things to go back to how they were, Ryan added. We know too much has happened, but we'd like to try to build something new, something better, hopefully. I thought about the sunflowers growing in two different places, now Sophie's connection between her two worlds, about how growth happens not in spite of darkness, but because of the journey through it toward light. I'd like that too, I said, and I meant it. Again. Summer arrived in a wave of heat and green abundance. My garden plot flourished, herbs spilling from their beds, cosmos and zinnias nodding in the breeze, Sophie's sunflowers stretching skyward, already taller than she was and still growing. My cottage had become truly mine, filled with a carefully curated collection of treasures from my old life and new additions that reflected who I was becoming. Photos of William still held places of honor, but they were joined now by new memories: Sophie and me at the community 4th of July picnic, Sarah at her college graduation, a group shot of the Lakeside Bridge Club with me in the center, smiling. Ryan and Bethany and I were finding our way toward a new kind of relationship, not the easy, unquestioning connection of before, but something more intentional, built on clearer boundaries and growing respect. They came to Lakeside for dinner once a month. I visited their apartment occasionally. We were learning each other again, with all our flaws and strengths in plain view. One evening in late July, I sat on my patio watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The air was heavy with the scent of my herbs and the distant, green smell of the lake. From somewhere nearby came the gentle notes of a wind chime, blending with the evening songs of birds settling for the night. I thought about the journey of the past year, the betrayal that had shattered my sense of safety, the fight to reclaim my autonomy, the slow, careful rebuilding of what had been broken, not the same as before, but perhaps stronger in the repaired places, like pottery mended with gold. Martha had told me once, in the darkest days after the hearing, that sometimes we have to lose what we thought we needed in order to discover what we truly want. At the time, it had seemed like cold comfort. Now, I understood the wisdom in her words. I had lost the illusion of a perfect family, the comfort of familiar surroundings, the identity I'd built around being needed. But I had gained something precious in return, the knowledge of my own strength, the freedom to redefine myself, the clarity that comes from having seen both the best and worst of those you love and choosing to love them anyway, eyes wide open. As darkness settled over the garden, I remained on the patio, content in my solitude, but no longer alone in the deeper sense. I had built a life here different from what I had imagined for my later years, but undeniably mine, a life with space for family, for friends, for purposeful work and quiet reflection, a life where I was seen and valued, not for what I could provide, but for who I was. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but in the breaking, it had also set me free, and that, I realized as stars began to appear in the velvet sky above, was perhaps the most unexpected gift of all.